There was his father, and he had two sons. Son number one was a bad son, and son number two, he was a good son. And the father, well, he was rich. One day, the bad son came to the father and he said, "Fuck you, Dad. Give me my money. I'm out of here." And the father said, "Cool. Go." And the son took his money and he ran off into yin. Yin is carpe diem. Bright lights, hookers, cocaine. Very good. The son spent a long time there until he partied the party out of the party, as we say. He ran out of money. So he went to the mafia and he took out a loan. Only by this point, he developed a horrible heroin habit. So he spent all that money on heroin. And now he's indebted to the mafia. And these guys, they're gonna kill him. So to pay everyone off and keep the habit alive, he finds himself turning tricks in an alleyway somewhere. And suddenly, he has a moment of clarity. And he says to himself, "This is so bad. I'm just going to go back to my father and ask to be a servant. Because even at this point, his servants have it better than I do." So he heads back towards home. Now the father, he sees him coming from a long way out. Does he say, "I told you so"? Yell at him? Give him a lecture? Any of that bullshit? No. He says, "Pierre, go get my bottle of Chateau Margaux 1875 out of the top drawer of my liquor cabinet and call up all of our friends, because tonight we're going to have a party." Almost as if this whole debacle was a rite of passage for his son. In fact, the father was very, very proud of his son. He'd fucked up completely. And the father, well, he knew he could do it. If you've heard this story before in a church setting, this is usually where the story ends. There's some static from son number two, but the father just needs to explain, "Look, my son was lost and now he's found." And while they're not wrong telling the story that way, they also aren't telling the whole story. But then again, how could they? They are son number two. Son number two spends all his time in yan. He's the good one. He never does anything wrong. And he only wants the best for everyone. And I'm pretty sure that if everyone thought like I think and did like I do, we would all be happy. Because hey, I'm the good one. You don't need to worry about son number one. He's usually out in the woods doing meth. It's son number two you need to think about, because he's usually very, very accomplished and very, very powerful. He's the President of the United States. He's on the cover of Forbes magazine. He invented the iPhone. He gets a movie made after him after he dies. He treated his employees like shit, but, you know, it's a cutthroat world, and you gotta get ahead. And he made a lot of money, so he must have been doing something right. He has children in the Congo that get held at gunpoint to mine the coltan that's necessary to make this iPhone. I wonder if they put that in the movie. I don't know. I didn't see it. The first time I ever smoked a cigarette in 5th grade, I was well on my way into yin. The first time I ever heard my parents break out in a fight in my household when I was 4 years old, and I internalized it and said to myself, "This is my fault. If only I would have done something different, I could have prevented all of this." I was well on my way to becoming son number two. Every time I engage with the junkie on a street corner, I'm talking to son number one. Every time I meet some yuppie who says something like, "Well, I don't really hate the homeless. I just don't understand why they can't," son number two. And despite all appearances, they are both suffering the same disease. They have huge fucking egos. Because the ego is an extremely codependent thing, and it relies on other people to thrive. It will either tell you, well, I could do better, or I'm not good enough. Between the two, which one do you think really loved the father? Son number one, because he said, I could do better, and then he realized he couldn't, and now he's just grateful to be there. Whereas son number two, he believes, if I do enough and achieve enough, then the father will love me. Meanwhile, while he's doing all of this work, he turns around and sees that the father is just freely giving it away to this total fuck-up over here. The story even says, the son says, why does he get the party? I'm the one who did everything right. You could argue that secretly, son number two hates the father. Son number two is an interesting one to come across, because we live in a society that both rewards him for his behavior and yet punishes him for his emotions, and infers something like, well, we don't understand why you would be so unhappy. You have 3 houses, 15 cars, and blah, blah, blah. What's your fucking problem? And you would think the whole wealth inequality thing would give me a perverse sense of pleasure out of that whole deal. But it doesn't, because pain is pain. And this guy is so fucking lost and confused, the only answer he could come up with is, well, I'm gonna make another $1 billion and double down and enslave even more kids in the Congo. Strangely enough, the cure for this whole thing from the father varies. What son number one needs to hear is, look, I know you want to go down that road, so go. And when it gets bad enough, you'll be back. And what son number two needs to hear is, I don't understand why you're doing all of that. You have my love. You can put it down. Just be. And the wisdom in all of that you would get no points either way. I just never could get over that. Until these sons whittle down their ego and come back to center, have fun out there. They won't, because none of their actions will be their own. But the blessing is, you don't understand how shitty it is until you're no longer in it. Now, just as son number one goes into darkness, there's only 2 things that could happen. It will either kill him or drive him straight back into the light. Whereas son number 2, for all of his light, it can only carry him into darkness. And the safest place to be in the hurricane is in the eye, with the Father. That way, you can wave as everyone goes by, but I won't be joining you in there. The book that this comes out of, and we're just going to call it a book, it starts off with this man and this woman, and they inherit a garden, and they are told, listen, I don't give a fuck what you do, but what I don't want to see you do is sit around judging yourself. Don't go thinking you would know what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad. You let me decide all of that, and you two just be. Of course, there really isn't much drama in that, and it's pretty simple. So someone needs to get a pair of pants so they could say, well, at least I'm not as bad as you. I have a pair of pants. Oh yeah? Well, I'll fucking kill you for those pants. Well, fine. I'll enslave a whole people and we'll make a whole fleet of pants. After all, it's only one pipeline in the Gulf of Mexico. I don't think that could ever happen again. The book that this comes out of is a 2-parter. And in part 2, there's this guy who shows up, and he's rolling with the father. And we're just going to call him a teacher. But both Yin and Yang come to him, and they ask, tell us, what are the rules? And he says to them, there aren't any. Stay with the Father. Listen to this. Follow your heart. Have some integrity. Not because there are a bunch of rules, but because everything is energy. And as long as you are out here looking, you are a fragmented person, and you are going to attract what you are. But when you come back to center, you become a whole human being, and you understand on a very deep and fundamental level that none of this belongs to me, and it never will. And therefore, all of it belongs to me, and it always will. And when I understand that, I ascend up out of this. And once that happens, well, who knows what could go down? Hell, you might even quit your job. Anyway, it's a good story. From my garden to your garden. Namaste.